With literally thousands of fonts to choose from, how do you know which one is the right one for your brand? In this video, I'll teach you how to choose the right font for your brand so that it becomes memorable and strengthens your brand. Hey everybody, I'm Rob Genovese from Unleash My Beast brand. I want to thank everybody in the community for being a part of what we're achieving. And if you're not yet a subscriber, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, ring the bell so you don't miss a single video. So what makes font choice even an important decision? I mean, what's the difference, right? Whether you choose Times Roman or Helvetica or Impact, what's the difference? Unless you're a designer, this is a really hard thing to think about. It's hard to discern what typeface you should use and when. Typeface, also called a font, is very key in rounding out your brand's personality. There's literally thousands, hundreds of thousands, maybe even millions of fonts out there. With sites such as Google Fonts or My Fonts or DaFont, it can be dizzying to choose the right one, knowing where to get it from, which one to choose, and which one to stick with. But to make it easy, I'm going to break it down for you. There's a few easy things you need to know in order to be able to choose the right font for your brand. The thing is, fonts have personality. Some fonts are serious fonts. Some fonts are fun. Some fonts are elegant. Some fonts are aggressive. Knowing the difference, knowing how to tell the difference, is part of how to choose the right one. Now, if you're not a designer, well then this becomes really dizzying. And I know, I've been a designer for a really long time, and even as a designer, I know that I can get bogged down spending hours choosing just the right font for the project I'm working on. So even for somebody who's experienced, it can be a very tedious task. So let's break it down. When you look at this font right here, you can see that this is a very strong font. What makes it strong? Well, first of all, it's thick, right? It's a very kind of fat looking font. It's got a lot of substance to it. You can see that this is what's called a sans serif font, which means it doesn't have those little feet on the top and bottom of it. It's kind of more informal, which is another point. It's a very informal font versus formal, which tends to take into account a more sophisticated feel. But this right here, this is also a strong font because of how straight up and down it is, because of how squared off it appears, kind of like a block. It seems very muscular. So this is really obvious. So you would use a font like this if you're working on a project or your brand is a very strong brand, one that needs to exude strength. Take a look at this font here. This is called a serif font. This means that it does have those little feet. You'll also notice that for the most part, serif fonts are very delicate. They're not as thick. They're not as heavy. They're not as strong looking. And because of those little feet, if you notice also in between the crossbars and the verticals, there's thicks and there's thins. Some parts are delicate, some parts are not so delicate. But this is a very formal typeface. This is what you use when you want a level of sophistication and elegance. There's a seriousness to it. And you would use this in certain situations that need to amplify that sophistication. Now this one here, this is a script font. Script fonts take the whole level of sophistication to a whole nother level. This is what you use in formal invitations. This is what you use when you want to be really fancy, when you want to raise elegance. You can see that the scriptiness, it kind of has a flourishy, flowing feel, right? So that scriptiness is for those sophisticated, fancy situations. You wouldn't use a font like this if you were talking about a business like a gym, where it might be down and dirty, where strength is involved, where aggressiveness is involved, where speed might be involved if it's an athletic type gym. This is not the font you want to use. And hey, if you're getting value out of this, go ahead and hit the subscribe button, ring the bell. I don't want you to miss a single video. I got new ones coming out every Tuesday and Friday. Now, before we mentioned informality in a font, well, being informal, in other words, being casual, emits another type of style. So when you look at this font here, this is a handwritten font. There's plenty of handwritten fonts to look at and to choose from out there. Handwritten fonts are very casual. Obviously, they have the feeling of how somebody just wrote it out, maybe took a pen and just wrote a note. And so they're very informal, they're very casual, not to be taken that seriously. But aside from that, they're used in cases where you want to have more of a personal connection with people. Say you wanted to have a project where handwriting makes it feel like it's personalized. Well, then that would be appropriate. But you wouldn't use a handwritten typeface if, say, you were to open a bank. Now, maybe you're not opening a bank, but maybe you're a financial advisor. Well, financial advising companies, they're very serious. They don't like to take risk. You don't want to associate risk when you think of your financial advising company. So a handwritten font all over the place on some marketing piece from a financial advising company wouldn't totally be appropriate. You don't want to make it feel like they're very casual with their money, like they're very informal with their money, or maybe they'll get to investing it in a wise place, maybe they won't. That's the personality that it emotes. So you can see what you're basically doing is you're choosing the font based on its personality. Based on the personality that your brand has, your font should replicate. So then, where do you even look for these fonts? Well, there's many sites out there you can choose from. You can look at Google Fonts. If you type that in and you go here, this gives you an array of fonts. They're free to use, and you can even play with some of the filters here, where, for instance, you can type in the name of your brand. You can go to one of the selectors, and if you have a brand like Rhino Fitness, you can go in there and you can choose a sans serif font, and you can see it filters out some of the fonts that are not sans serif. You can choose the weight, you can slide that, and you can see it will filter out some of the fonts that are not as heavy. So now what you're left with is you're left with heavier fonts that are going to take on the personality of your brand. You could also go to a place like myfonts.com. These are some paid fonts, but you can do the same thing there. Hit some of those filters. That way you can find the font that's appropriate to your brand. If you're finding this valuable, go ahead and hit the like button, give it a thumbs up, pop your questions and comments below. I'd love to hear from you. And if you want more great information about how to be a brander and build a brand, check out some of these videos here for more great insights.